representation methods. So far in the last class we have seen the different ways that data exists, like structured data, you have unstructured data, or you have semi-structured data. So this video we are going to discuss about what are the different ways that the data can be used, and it can be used in any application, and in our case how can we use it in machine learning algorithms. So now there are various ways. The basic goal of data storage management is to make the data available for analysis, right? So data is assembled, it must be stored in a structured way so that it can be used for further data analysis. There are various ways through which we can organize and manage the data. Some of the basic methods that we'll be discussing in this session is flat files, database systems, WWW, XML, data stream, RSS, and JSON. So these are the different approaches we are now going to discuss through which we can organize and manage the data. So let's first look into flat files. A very common example of flat file is CSV and TSV, that is comma separated value and tab separated value, which you might have already used. Right? So basically this, as if you have already used this, you must be knowing that it's a very simple way and a very commonly available way of storing the data. It is also one of the very cheapest way of organizing the data. Basically flat files are files where the data is stored in a plain ASCII format or in a EBCDIC format. But the major disadvantage of using flat files is any minor change of data in a CSV file or a TSV file or in any flat file, it will affect the entire data mining algorithm. So you should be aware of that. But flat file is very good when you are having small data sets. Okay, but this is not very suitable. Using CSV or a TSV for larger data set is not very ideal. But these are very commonly used and used methods today for most of the machine learning algorithms where we have a small database. So we also call this as a spreadsheet format. So CSV, as I told you, is a comma separated value where you will have the value separated by commas. Okay, so you can it can be used by a spreadsheet, or you can also use this in a database application. So normally what happens is you have the values in the form of rows, and the first row normally will have the attribute and the rest of the rows will have the data. TSV file stands for tab separated value. It is similar to CSV. The only difference is now the values are separated by tab instead of a comma. Now both CSV and TSV are generic in nature and it can be easily shared. That is one of the most that's the advantage of using it. It is generic and you can easily share it, and there are many tools like Google Sheets and Microsoft Excel which can be used to process these files. Now how you can use CSV, how you can use TSV in your machine learning algorithm, I will put the link of that in the description box. You can access that and try it in your projects. Now coming to the next way of storing the data, which is very common, that is a database system, right? Most of us might be aware of this, like DBMS, which stands for Database Management System, where you will have some kind of original data and metadata in your file. So the main goal of DBMS is to manage the data and improve the operator performance using various tools like Database Administrator, Query Processing, and Transaction Manager. Now basically the database here will be a table or a set of tables, and a table will have rows and columns. The columns will represent the attributes and the row will represent the tuples. And each row is actually called as a record. So basically number of records will be equal to the number of rows. Right? So the user, if you are using a database, then you can easily access and manipulate the data in a database using SQL queries. Now another way, there are different types of databases. One is the transactional database, time series database, and the third one is a spatial database. Now transactional database, as the word itself says, this is basically going to collect, this is basically a collection of transactional records. Okay, as I told you, a record will be, you can imagine that to be one row. Okay, so each record you can say is a transaction. Now what kind of transaction? It may have a timestamp, it may have identifier, set of items which may have links to other tables. Okay, and one very easy way to understand a transactional database is, one very good example is credit card transaction, or if you're transferring money from one bank to another. So that's a very good example of transactional database, where each record or each row will represent a transaction which will have association with timestamps or identifier or set of items. Okay, the second type of database is time series database. As the word itself says, here you are storing the information and it is related with respect to time. So data is associated with a timestamp. Timestamp in the sense, here the data here you may have is associated with, can be associated with a period, like say hourly data, you can have weekly data or yearly data or repeated time span. So very good example of this is, maybe you're trying to observe the sales pattern of a product continuously. So you may be examining the sales of this product probably hourly or weekly or yearly. So that's an example of time series database. The third one is spatial database. So this will contain spatial information, right, in a raster format, so or a vector format. So what is raster format? Raster format is nothing but a pixelated format, for example a JPEG or a PNG image or a .gif image, or it can be a vector format. So vector format is basically used to store maps or maps using basic geometric primitives like points, lines, polygons and so forth. So spatial database will have spatial information. What kind of spatial information? It can be a GPS coordinates, it can be lines information, roads, rivers, polygons, for example, which can be used to find out what are the borders, land use zones. So these are all the spatial information, can be represented in a pixelated format, which we call it as a raster format, or it can be stored in the form of a points, lines, polygons and so forth, which we call it as a vector format. So the third various other ways through which we can store the data is, one is www. We all know now World Wide Web, which is providing us diverse and worldwide online information source it is. So basically one of the main goals of data mining algorithms is to mine interesting patterns of information which is actually present in the World Wide Web. The second one is XML. XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. This is another way, or very commonly used in machine learning, right? Most of the data we also have in an XML format, and advantages, XML is both human as well as machine interpretable data format, and it can be easily shared across various platforms. Now how you can work on XML on your machine learning algorithms, for this also I will give you the link in the description box. Now coming to the data stream, now data can also be dynamic, right? It keeps coming, it keeps going, and also there will be huge data. We are having dynamic data which keeps varying. It may also have some kind of a fixed order movement as well, and there may be a lot of real-time constraints. So data can also be a stream of data, it can be a flow of data. That is also one thing. And the fourth type of data source is RSS. It stands for really simple syndication. Okay, now this is a format which normally we see in instant feeds across various services, right? So RSS is basically a web feed format where it is used to publish frequently updated works like blog entries, news headlines, latest property information, car listings in a standardized format. So basically this is a web feed format, and normally it will have like a particular format, like you will have a summary description, you will have a photo, you will have some features. So these are basically, it's a format for sharing instant feeds across the services. So that's an example of RSS. And the next one is JSON, as it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Now this is a standard text-based format for representing structured data. So JSON is used to represent the structured data, and it is based upon JavaScript object syntax, and this is very commonly used for transmitting data in web applications. Okay, suppose I'm sending some data from server to a client. So it can be displayed on a web page or a service, vice versa. You can have that data in a form of a JSON. So it's a very useful data interchange format, and we commonly use it in machine learning again. So for this also I have given a link in the description box how you can read and write JSON files using Python programming. So that also link I have given in the description box. So these are all very commonly used, and especially since we are talking about machine learning, JSON, XML, HTML, these are all very commonly used data formats through which we are actually accessing the data. CSV, TSV, they're very commonly used in machine learning. So that was about the data storage. So in the next session we will discuss about big data analysis. Thank you so much, and please subscribe to our channel. Thank you.